just change the spark plug in ours last week. I don't
It
know if
has
it
to
works or
be
not.
available for
It didn't
All right.
work.
editing.
Appreciate everyone's coming in here, even though a little inclement weather. For tonight's first, our work session on Tuesday, January 16th. On the audit work that's been going on, I'm going to pass it over to City Manager Karen Conard to lead the presentation.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, everyone. I'm really most proud of this work. It was quite an effort and quite a learning experience for all of us to bring on a new vendor, and we had a very good experience. So I'm going to let our finance director, who really shepherded this effort on behalf of the city, introduce the matter and introduce the folks from CLA. And Judy will first open up with updates on ACFR and PAFR.
Yes, thank you, Karen, and good evening, Mayor and members of the City Council, members of the Audit Committee, and members of the public. I'm very pleased to be here tonight. We have worked really well with Clifton, Lawson, and Allen, who I'll introduce in just a moment, and they will go over in more detail the audit and the annual comprehensive financial report, which is known as our ACFR, which is a very detailed, comprehensive report. But what I'd like to remind folks is at the same time that we're preparing the ACFR report, we're also preparing the popular annual financial report. It's just a much smaller document. It's a document that GFOA recommends to prepare that extracts certain pertinent information from the ACFR report and put it in an easy-to-read format for those who do not have a strong background in finance. But in addition to this book, it has a lot of links. It has a lot of information about some of our departments. It has some more statistical information. And I did leave some books at the counter, at the table up front here. We put some at the library. We're going to distribute them around in different areas for people to take. But I do encourage people to look at our electronic format that's on the Finance Department's website, because everything in this document is linked. And it has a great, shows the programs for the recreation and the library, and you can go in and you can tab. There's also a little tutorial on how to navigate around this report also. So I do encourage people to look at that report. So at this time, I will pass over to Matt Hunt and Phil Huang from Clifton, Lawson, Allen, LLP, or otherwise known as CLA. Matt?
Thank you, Judy, and thank you to everybody for having us here tonight. My name is Matthew Hunt. I'm with CLA. That is our preferred name now. Keep it simple, go the acronym world. I'm also here with Phil Wong from CLA as well. Want to just say thank you for having us here tonight, and also this is our first year doing the city's audit, so very thankful to have established this relationship with the city, and glad to hear that the folks from the city that have said so far that they feel like we did a good job. I'm glad to hear that. I feel like it was a successful audit, first year audit, and thank the finance team for all the hard work in helping getting everything that we need for the audit. So without further ado, I don't know if there's a presentation. There we go. So just sort of going over the agenda, if you want to go next slide.
Working on that.
So tonight what we want to talk about is terms of engagement. So to give you the overall perspective of what exactly is it that we're required to do as an audit firm, then give you an executive summary based on those terms of engagements, what were the results, give you some financial highlights as well, some of the numbers that we want to point out. We'll also talk about the other report that's being discussed tonight, the management letter, then talk to you about some required communications, and then open it up for questions. So in terms of engagement, really for the financial statement portion of the audit, which is what we're talking about, not the federal grants portion of the audit, that's a separate piece of it. For the financial statement piece of the audit, three key things in terms of our objectives. We have to express an opinion on the financial statements as to whether they're presented in accordance with GAAP. We have to provide a report on internal control over financial reporting and compliance with laws and regulations that might have an impact on financial reporting. And then we also have to provide other required communications to management and governance. So next slide will show you that for those three elements, what the results were in a summary basis. So in terms of the financial statements and our expression of an opinion, that opinion is an unmodified opinion. That is the best opinion that you can receive in a financial statement audit. And what that basically means is that based on the work that we did, the audit procedures that we did not identify any material misstatements to the city's financial statements. Also good results on the other piece there about reporting on internal controls and on compliance. There were no internal control findings or compliance findings. Keep in mind that your management letter is outside of these internal control findings and compliance findings. Those would be if you had material weaknesses or significant deficiencies in internal control. It would be on a separate report. But in terms of the required report, there are no findings. Same thing with required communications, no findings or issues. So that's really sort of the overall summary of the audit. You could look at it and say it was a clean audit. That's essentially what the results show you. So in terms of some of the financial results, and I'll turn it over to Phil in a minute, but just want to talk a little bit about the general fund. Obviously, that's a key fund. Your bond rating agencies look at that, obviously, internally. The general fund's very important, so want to sort of focus on some of the numbers here. So give you a little bit of a comparison to last year, but want to sort of focus on this year's numbers. So at the end of June 30, 2023, the city's unassigned fund balance was about $18 million. Your total fund balance was about $55 million. So if you look at your governmental funds balance sheet and you look at your general fund, you'll see that there are various categories of general fund, but really it's that unassigned fund balance number that your bond rating agencies tend to take a look at the most. So it's also not only good to look at that number as a whole, but also compare that number to your overall budget. It just gives you a nice ratio and sort of gives you an idea of what your reserves are at. And also the city does have a policy of maintaining a reserve percentage between 10 and 17%. So at the end of June 30, 2023, that percentage was 13.7%, fairly consistent with the previous year. So overall, your general fund increased during the year. You have that percentage that is in line with city policy, so overall positive results there. So now I'll turn it over to Phil and talk to you about some of the other financial results.
Great, thanks, Matt. So with water enterprise funds, the ending long-term debt liability for the year was about $35 million. Your net pension liability was about $2.6 million. Your OPEB liability was about $240,000, and your overall net position was about $63 million. And the overall change in net position for the year was about $1.5 million. Next slide. For the sewer enterprise, the total long-term debt liability was approximately $129 million. The net pension liability was about $3.5 million. Your OPEB liability was about $252,000, and the ending net position was approximately $82 million. And then the overall change for the year was approximately $2.8 million. Next slide, please.
I think you're going to the general.
This one.
You going to long-term next?
Yep, long-term, yep. So overall, with your long-term liabilities, the total long-term debt outstanding for the year stayed pretty consistent at about $280 million. Your debt service as a percentage of the general fund expenses was 10.9%. And the city's overall pension liability was about $113 million. And the OPEB liability was approximately $17.2 million.
And so really just sort of with those financial highlights, I think the key takeaway is that your general fund's healthy, your enterprise funds have healthy net position, had positive changes in net position, and when it comes to your long-term liabilities, they're all being managed well. Obviously with pension obviously that comes from the state retirement system, but none of those liabilities jump out as being odd or unusual. They're pretty much in line with municipalities your size. So that's really the financial highlights. So now I want to jump into the manager letter. So as we talked about earlier, the manager letter only contains items that we feel are best practice type items, things that we feel could be improved within the city. That does not report any kind of significant deficiencies or material weaknesses in internal controls. Those would have to be reported on a separate report. So these are more just sort of best practice type recommendations. So jumping into it, you have 3 comments. Phil's going to talk about the last two comments, but the first comment related to information technology. Now, as we did point out in the manager letter, there was a few things in the report that we did not necessarily feel that we could disclose in the manager letter, but for the items that were in the manager letter, just want to briefly go over those. I'm not an IT expert, but having worked with that group on other audits, some of the findings that we see here are consistent with some findings that we've seen in other municipalities as well. And our IT specialists that worked on this are always available to the city if there's ever any additional information that you need, or if you need any assistance with implementing some of these recommendations. Sort of just going through it, and so the 5 comments that are in the management letter. When it comes to IT policies, they're in draft format, so the recommendation there is just work towards getting those formally approved. In terms of periodic access reviews over user rights, that is a good procedure to do on a scheduled basis, just to make sure that if there's terminated employees that have left the city, that they no longer have access to any of the city's systems. So the way to do that is to have a formal, routine, periodic procedure that you do. Doesn't mean that the city has never done it, it's just get on a periodic, routine basis with it. Same thing, and this sort of came about when we did test a sample of some terminated employees. We did identify that there were some on the list that did still have access to the system. So that's why it's a good idea to do that periodic access review. Comment about ticketing system. I can only speak from my own personal experience at CLA. Whenever we have an IT issue, we have a ticketing system, sort of tracks everything. You can't really do anything from an IT basis without it being formally tracked by this ticketing system. The city has one as well. So the recommendation here, though, is to fully utilize it. That change management, whenever there's changes to IT, you use the ticketing system for approvals and also sort of to document any changes that have taken place. And then lastly, when it comes to granting user access to new users, there is a process in place. There are processes in place, but it can vary depending on the department, et cetera. So we're just looking to have a formal process that's consistent for all new users. So again, that's sort of the summary of the IT comment. I'll turn it over to Phil.
Okay, thanks. So with accounts payable, like Matt said, none of these were, significant deficiencies, but these were just kind of things that we thought the city could implement or work on to improve their system of internal controls. So, as part of our testing, we did notice that individuals could have the ability to create new vendors, enter invoices, prepare cash disbursement files, and process cash disbursements. And then, so best practice would be to divvy up some of these responsibilities to different individuals. And so our kind of recommendation here is to continue to allocate responsibilities and implement the improvements to the system of internal controls over accounts payable. And I'll add that the management letter has the management's responses to this comment as well, and some of the procedures that they have implemented. And I'll sort of leave it at that.
And then the
sorry.
last one.
And the last one relates to the informational compensated absence. So the GASB issued a statement number 101 related to compensated absences. And compensated absences is not something new to the city. It's something that's already on the city's financials. The difference here is the recognition for the leave that is more likely than not to be paid, used, or otherwise settled. And so the city should look to reevaluate the liability in the context of more likely than not in the upcoming years, and familiarize themselves with the upcoming GASB to be implemented in 2025.
So you've got 2 years on that one, so this is just more of an informational comment to make you aware that it's coming down the road. Next slide. So then last couple of slides here, and then we'll open it up for questions. In addition to a management letter, there's also additional required communications that we have to provide to the governance of the city. So we're going to do that here in this forum. So looking at it, significant accounting policies. Management is responsible for all accounting policies. They're all described in Note 1 of the financial statements if you want to see those. And no transactions lacked authoritative guidance. Your footnote disclosures, obviously, in addition to your financial statements and all the numbers in there, you've got footnotes as well, which give you some additional information. All those disclosures, in our opinion, are neutral, consistent, and clear. In terms of any significant or unusual transactions, we did not identify any that would fall into that category. Next slide. In terms of disagreements with management, we did not have any. In terms of management consultants with other independent accountants, we're not aware of any. And then any other significant issues discussed with management prior to the engagement, there were none. Any conversations they had within the normal course of our professional relationship. So that's really, again, a summary. I know there's a lot of information in these reports, and I know this summary is just a summary base, but we do feel like we wanted to pull out the important information. And again, from a big picture perspective, you have a clean audit, you have good financial condition with your general fund, your enterprise funds, your long-term liabilities are being managed well. And when it comes to your management letter, again, I do feel like these are excellent best practice recommendations. The city is already working towards implementing some of those improvements. So I do feel like overall, I do feel like the city's FY23 audit is a positive. So I'd like to open it up for questions.
Thank you, Mr. Hunter. Any questions? And Mr. Wang, any questions? Councilor Tabor, and yes, both members of the audit committee, please feel free to ask questions as well.
Go ahead, John.
Councilor Tabor.
Thanks, Matt and Phil. If the height of stacks on the desk is any indication of the workload that you guys did, it was impressive. I saw the stacks in your conference room.
We just tried to make it look good.
That's right. You said that debt service was at 10.9%. I think we're used to seeing a figure around 7 or 8.
I don't have the number in front of me.
Are you looking at the financials, or are you talking, I'm sorry.
It was part of his presentation.
Okay, in the
I think
water
Phil
sewer.
mentioned a debt service number in the liabilities section.
And that would have been in water and sewer. So it would have been
Okay.
outside our policy of the general fund.
Okay, yeah,
Assuming
that's a
within 10%.
higher ceiling. Got it. And maybe this is a question for the city manager and Judy. You guys noted that we still had ghosts in our system, people with IT accounts that were no longer with the city. Do we have any standard change of status form that we process for either hiring or separating that's approved by, a supervisor?
I'll
or
take that. We do.
department head?
And many of the changes that are best practices are things that Pat Ainsworth, our CIO, and her team are in the process of implementing anyway. So would you like to hear from Pat? Would the council like to hear from Pat quickly, or?
I think my question is more, is there a piece of paper whenever somebody is hired or fired or
There is.
or separates,
Yes.
and some person in authority signs off on that?
Need the mic. You need the mic.
Do you have a process where HR notifies us whenever someone is separated for any reason from the city? It's not only on paper, but it's retained electronically. The findings were people that had left long ago when our systems were not in as good shape as they are now. But I'm quite confident if somebody leaves the city now, we know about it right away. And we are doing regular audits just in case we miss somebody to check them all.
Right. And last question, if I could, Your Honor. The statewide property tax lawsuit, the judge has ruled that he doesn't want towns and cities keeping surplus statewide property tax. But the important thing was he ruled that should be put in escrow. Now, there's a long legal path that this is going to walk, but should we be creating reserve?
Well, I'm not really sure how to answer that. I think that's in the beginning stages. I mean, I know that there's been talk. Jane Farini has, and Nathan from the school department has broached that subject with us, but I think that might be a little long way out or not.
I think what we can do is touch upon that next week at the budget overview, and between now and then, Jane and Nathan can give us some guidance on how to position that in the FY25 budget.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Thanks.
It could be that the way we structure our accounts now, we are heading into a position to keep that.
Right.
Mr. White, did you have a question?
Thank you. Yes. First of all, I'm so grateful that CLA has been brought on board to conduct the financial audit. So thank you very much. I did have several comments based on the management letter, as well as the auditor's opinion letter and the ACFR. In the management letter, I'm gratified to see that CLA flagged the need to tighten controls around the accounts payable. We private citizens on the audit committee had sensed that the city was able to establish new accounts for vendors, handle invoices and cash disbursements very easily. So it's good to see that this deficiency had been spotted by CLA, and the recommended necessary improvements in internal controls to establish countersigning and second-person approvals were made. So that's excellent. And, you know, I'm not saying that this is the case here, but this is a fertile ground for fraud. So it's really great that this is being addressed. And I also note with satisfaction the tightening of the compensated absences accounting that should be put in place in 2025. And finally, the CLA's knowledge and expertise in IT was one of many attributes that we found attractive in CLA. And so it's gratifying to see that there's a substantial discussion in the management letter for covering this area, especially since the city has poured significant resources into IT this year. And those 5 points of concern that CLA mentioned suggests that there needs to be a tightening by the tech area to help address these areas of concern. The ticketing is certainly a critical component because it's really the only mechanism you have for tracking what has been done and who did it in case anything has to be done again or reviewed, provides the audit trail necessary for IT. The new user access and control of access for those who left are critical for limiting who has keys to the kingdom. There should be no open door policy there. And the network user inventory should take top priority to limit access for security reasons. So all of these points, I think, are very well taken by CLA, and it's gratifying to see that they were cited in the management letter report. So thank you.
Mr. White, any other questions and or comments? Councilor Bullock, and then did I see Judy? Did you?
I would, if I have a chance, yes.
I just want to make a comment. I just want to thank CLA for working with our financial staff. I want to thank our financial staff in the city for all this work. I know this is not easy. It looks easy because it came out clean in this nice report, but I just want to thank you all for the hard work.
Thank you.
Judy?
Okay, thank you. I'd just like to comment on the accounts payable comment in the management letter to just kind of put it rest and ease for those who are listening. When we first had this discussion with CLA, you know, I was appreciative of their comments, and we had some long conversations about this. Internal controls we take very serious in the finance department, especially to eliminate or mitigate any kind of fraud. And with the accounts payable, it is a part-time position, and we have a lot of people in the department that are backup to this. And backup to any piece in the finance department is very important, because if we have an absent or someone's on vacation or a vacancy, we have other folks in the office that can keep the progress going and so forth. So the internal control structure that we've had in place for many years has been a very thorough examination of layers of approval processes. So invoices come in, they're approved by the department heads, then they go through a fine check with the accounts payable person, they go through either Andrew or myself for another approval level. We also have, what also detects fraud is a very rigorous monthly bank reconciliation of all checks that come through. So that is done in a timely manner. And also we have a positive pay that we implemented several years ago, which has proven to have literally saved several attempts of fraud from external scammers and whatnot. And this is a system where anytime a check is produced in our system, there's a file that gets uploaded to the bank. And as checks come through, they have to be matched exactly from our file to what comes through the bank. If it doesn't match exactly, it comes back to us as flagged as a suspicious item. We literally have fraud attempts to us on this basis of checks almost on a monthly, quarterly basis. We have stopped hundreds of thousands of dollars that was fraudulent money being scammed from outside entities. So our internal controls are, I think, in good standing. What we're going to do, because of the recommendation from CLA, is add one more step to this process, that we sign off on the actual file that's uploaded, but the person who's uploading the file to the bank can only upload the file. Someone else in our department will go in and verify that number and push that file out. That is very similar to all our wire transfers, all our bond payments that are done electronically. One person sets it up, another person has to do that verification. So I just wanted to make that comment that we are adding one additional step to this process, just to have a better security of our city funds.
Thank you, Judy. Any other questions before we open it up to public comment? I will welcome. Jesse.
Just to follow up to Councilor Tabor's question on debt service, and if you can get back to us later, if you have to get back to us later, that's fine. But curious, in the general fund, the debt service ratio to liabilities this year, and then how that compares to 2022 and potentially 2021.
Yes, are you talking in terms of debt service as a percentage of expenses, or what
Right,
ratios?
right.
Yeah, that's something we can get information to you for.
Okay, good. And the number today, you don't have to.
The number is down to 10.9. I got to be honest with you, I don't. It's not
Okay.
in the financial statements, but we can look at that number.
I can comment on that. It is on page 127 of the financial statements. I think that's what Councilor Tabor was referring to. And it does say for fiscal year 23, 10.9, which is what CLA said. But this is governmental funds. So this is not just general fund. This is the consolidation of all your funds excluding like your enterprise funds. So any grants and capital project funds. So that's off of actual expenses. The policy that we have in the general fund when we prepare our budgets is to stay under 10% of our net debt when we're projecting out what we want for the fiscal year each year. So we stay under that 10% general fund only based on the annual appropriation. And net debt meaning we still get building aid, so we subtract that building aid that we get. So this is a different reporting. So I don't know if that clarifies. And there's 10 years of history in this book. If you want to see.
What page is that, Judy?
It's in the statistical section of the ACFR, so this is page 127.
127, thank you.
Any further questions, comments? I'll open it up to public comment.
Good evening, Petra Huda. Questions as usual. 280 South Street. My first question is, when will the management letter and current year recommendations from the auditors be available to the rest of us? It is not in the packet, and it definitely wasn't in with this, so I would just request that it be available. My next question would be on the detail that was discussed by the auditor. How are you, as a governing body, going to monitor that steps are being taken and this process, both of them for AP and IT, are going to be complete? Something to think about. That would be my question. The auditors won't be back for another year. In the meantime, the governing body is responsible for all of this. So since the recommendations did come forward, we should be able to monitor and measure them. Thank you.
Thank you, Petra. Any other comments? Seeing none and seeing none on Zoom, just like to thank everyone for coming in this evening. It's appreciated. CLA did a great job. The presentation was clear and concise. There are action items to be taken. I expect them to be worked through over the next couple of months. I know with IT, just for example, on, if we have, I don't even know if we have an active directory, but in terms of numbers of employees that we have to gain or lose access to. But a lot of that work kind of goes into the nuts and bolts that we have been working, but it will be good test to see whether or not we can implement some of those controls this year, given the investments we've made over the last 3 years in IT. And I'm pleased to hear Judy and staff are working on the recommendations from an access control standpoint, and would expect an update on that in relatively short order as we work towards making that, understanding that it might require additional resources to do so. But all of that would probably be the best place to be fleshed out in the budget conversations, which are going to be happening just tomorrow. So look forward to the work that goes into that. And I want to thank the members of the Audit Committee, Mr. White, and Mr. Lynch, for your work on this as well. It's very much appreciated. Okay. Well, we have a non-public, so I'd wait a motion to enter into non-public session.
So
Second.
All in favor? Aye. See you at 7, Portsmouth.